pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
District mission statement: the mission of the Exeter West Greenwich Regional School District is to empower students to dream, reach, and succeed. Open forum. Comments must be directed to the chairperson of the school committee, who may limit or terminate or discuss any discussion. No comment should address personnel, litigation, negotiations as restricted by open meetings regulations. The school committee cannot take action or vote on topics introduced that are not reflected on the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the school committee? Jim, could you review the consent agenda for us?
Under consent, we have the regular meeting minutes from September 28th, as there was no action on those minutes at the last meeting. We also have the regular meeting minutes from October 26th. We have several resignations, most of which are extracurricular and coaching positions. The athletic director is working on filling those at the time. We have our monthly bills, and then we have one returning family for our homeschool approval. If we could just adjust the grade level of that student from 8 to 9. And that have to be adjusted.
Would any of the membership want anything pulled from the consent agenda? I will pull the September 28th meeting minutes. So I will entertain a motion at this time to approve the consent agenda as modified.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, withdrawing the 28th,
September 28th.
September 28th.
I'll second that. Any questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Abstentions, nay. Motion passes. So the reason I had the 28th meeting minutes is there's some issue going on. Jeremy, could you do me a brief favor here and just play the audio of the September 28th meeting?
Yep.
Thank you. So I think it's pretty obvious there was a point of order in play for the item regarding member Pandy's text regarding whether essentially I should have brought back the group home legal opinion request. I have the floor. And what it came down to was whether or not there was a point of order in progress to recognize a subject that had already been closed earlier in the meeting. And at that point, I did not recognize the point of order. Therefore, the text point of the order and subject matter that was actually described prior to the request for point of order is not relevant. So clearly, all that needs to be put into the meeting minutes at this time is that the point of order entered by Ms. Pandy, member Pandy, was not recognized and carried by the chairman. So, does anyone have any questions or comments on that? None.
I withdrew what was written in the minutes. I told you to withdraw what's in the minutes. And before the point of order, I don't remember what I said.
It came through, it didn't
I don't know
carry.
why you're bringing this up again, because I just use a comment.
Obviously, the problem is that you didn't hear the point. It was a 3-3. It was 3 abstentions, 3 yeas. The change didn't get carried because of the 3-3 situation, 3 abstentions, 3 votes. So that's why I brought it back, So now we're going to take another minutes to basically another vote on motion to accept the minutes of September 28th. Let's just do it and move on.
There were other comments I made before I said, fine, point of order, and I said, if you were fighting with me. There were other comments I made before that, that I actually could ask the secretary to put into the minutes. It was before the point of order. But I won't, I told you he was wrong.
Right, but they were there nevertheless, and we had to address them. So we are, now that we all agree that the point of order was not recognized by the chair, I'm going to make a motion at this time to accept the September 28th meeting minutes with the modification that the point of order was not recognized by the chair. So I need a second.
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Abstentions? Nay? Is that an abstention?
Yep, I was saying.
So two, look like 6 yays and 1 abstention. All right, moving on with my bad eyesight and math. Correspondence, discipline report. Does anybody have any questions or comments from the correspondences? No. All right, moving on. The 21-22 budget projection, either Jim or Bob, do you have any comments or observations for the school committee?
This is the first projection of the 22 budget for this school year. Again, we are in very good shape. I would just point to everybody's attention that we look at the projected 2021 unassigned general fund balance at the bottom, the 2.6 million. That does not, these numbers do not include any of the assignments or commitments from the 21 school year or the ones that will be coming for 22. Just for the simple fact that we're in the middle of the audit season, and I want to report when we get the final report on that, where our commitments stand and where our assignments stand. So, but I did feel it was important to show the school committee where we were as far as the revenues and as far as the expenses, and you can see that our expenses are in line with our revenue.
So questions or comments from the membership? Hearing none. Thank you. Monthly status reports. Do you have any narratives for the monthly status reports? Are we good?
I'll just, we'll take questions in case anyone has questions or comments.
Their capital project, are we going to get an update on those heating systems under capital projects?
Yeah, I could do that on the capital project.
Okay, sure. Okay, hearing none. No questions or comments. I'm going to move on. So new business. This is regarding, I asked this to be put on. And so I will put this on via a motion. And basically, I'll state the motion and then we'll talk to it. So I'd like to move to have the EWG School Committee authorize the superintendent and the EWG solicitor develop a policy prohibiting parent email addresses for all-day referendum communication. Okay,
Second.
okay, so what this stems from is that I assume that we have electronic systems and servers that are used to notify parents typically when there's a snow day. This is how you would expect it to be used. You know, there's an early outage. In other words, the you know, schools are closing early. Maybe there's a parent-teacher conference going on next in the week or earlier in the week. These are typical of what I would expect this this electronic equipment to be used. In addition to those uses, it's been used to notify parents on the day before the all-day referendum or the day of the all-day referendum that that activity is taking place. And could you support the all-day referendum budget request? So as the practice has been in the past, and I'm saying this just doesn't happen in the past year, it's been going on for a couple of years now. Past practice is about a month before the all-day referendum, maybe 3 weeks. We send out a flyer to all the addresses in Exeter and West Greenwich that identifies the budget proposal, the day of the all-day referendum, where you can vote, you know, be at Exeter Town Hall or West Greenwich Town Hall, wherever the voting takes place. And that's about it. And that goes to every voter, every registered voter in both towns. So that would be about, 7,000 individuals, addresses, whatever it is. But in addition to that, parents got kind of like an additional wake up in the morning kind of thing where they got paged and they would say, we'd like you, whoever it was from the school department, to support our budget. So the benefit there is, one, they actually get notified, again, reminded that the all-day referendum is either tomorrow or the next day, which probably most people don't get. Certainly I wasn't getting it. My child graduated from the school system about 6 years ago. And even when she was in the school system, we didn't get it, but I think this activity took place after that. So most people, other than the parents or the guardians of children that are currently enrolled in our school department, get this benefit. And that seems unfair because the equipment is paid for by the public, and all public, for whatever reason, may have an interest in participating in the all-day referendum, be it their reason or not. But only parents get the benefit of this reminder, and they also get an advocation or an opinion that says, hey, please support our budget. I don't necessarily say, can't remember if there was a rationale given behind supporting the budget, but obviously what you have are employees using our equipment to enrich the school department, which indirectly, the employees benefit. Simply because, if the budget passes, they're likely to benefit from that, right? To get better raises, whatever. We could speculate on that. So what I am suggesting at this time, it's pretty simple motion that we create a policy that identifies the non-uses or the uses of the electronic equipment to notify the parents in the school district of particularly authorized events. So an authorized events, like I said, school's out today, there's a snowstorm, or we're leaving, kids are leaving early today because, we've had a power outage at one of the schools. There's a problem with the water system. These are typical notifications that I see that have no political consequence. But in this case, I am asking us to prohibit the use of these almost private notifications that say, on today, there's the all-day referendum, please go and vote. So that was rather long, complicated, but I will now at this time open the floor up to the other members for questions or comments. Member Pandy.
I'd like to have the superintendent, so I know reminders go out to the families to remind them to vote. I know it was part of a public relations campaign a long time ago, where reminder emails went out to vote, and it was actually before you. So can you just let us know what, if it's the reminder emails, can you let us know if they're just reminder emails?
Outside of the mailing that we send out to everybody, the only thing that goes out is a reminder email that is a part of that.
They're unbiased.
Just a reminder.
It's just a reminder, that's what I thought. So Mr. McFadden was inaccurate. They're unbiased, they're reminders. You had said that the emails say to support our budget. their reminder emails that go out. As I asked our superintendent. We do, and then we do have a policy, I don't know which policy is communicating with the public. So we do have a policy regarding sending these emails out, that does exist. Unfortunately, there's nothing in our packet as far as the topic goes, so nobody has anything to review or read ahead of time.
Let me just reply to that for 1 second, is that it does approach or attempt to communicate to a percentage of the public, but not the public at large. And the entire public has the opportunity to participate in this activity. And the entire public, through its taxes, pays for the equipment, but only a small subpopulation of the entire population benefits from its use, and that seems discriminatory in its nature. So as far as advocation of the budget or not, my memory must be mistaken on that, because I kind of remember that there was an advocation piece of this, that you should support our budget. But you are correct, I did not bring in the text that actually was sent out. It perhaps Superintendent Aronakis is thinking of 1 year over another year, and I'm doing the very same. It's been going on for more than 1 year, and I'd like us to make sure that not a specific part of the population, if we can't approach the entire population that paid for this equipment, then we shouldn't do it at all. And we do send them out, then we do send out the all-day referendum emailer 3 weeks, a month before the actual activity that tells people the day, what the budget amount was, where you can go. That certainly goes out. But this email or this text message doesn't go out to everybody. It goes out to a very, I would say maybe what, 20% of the population. So 20% of the population that directly benefits from a budget. You could say that parents are more likely to benefit directly if the budget passes than, say, a senior citizen who may not have any children in the school department. I'm going to recognize Ms. Monroe. I think I saw her hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. So as a parent in the school district, this month alone, through this system, I've received notifications about a food drive, about PTA events, about flu clinics, and I think a few other school events that are open to the public, but we don't send those to the entire public. Jim, how else do we use the system outside of cancellations and school notifications that would be specific only to the school? Is there anything I'm forgetting?
Well, the listservs are connected to our student information system. So there are communications that go out to subgroups of the entire parent population as well. You know, the Waterloo principal, for example, will send something out, just updates the Waterloo family. Same thing happens at Metcalf, junior high school, senior high school. So they're used pretty consistently for just general communication of school events. Whenever we get a request from the community to share out information, we also do that through the listservs. Cancellations actually don't happen through those listservs. The cancellations happen through the Referendum Broadcasters Association, totally separate platform. So any kind of an emergency school cancellation, early release is not done through that.
I can't think of a reason why we would limit a notification to remind parents to vote when we send other notifications to parents about public events affecting the community. That only goes to the parents. As a school committee, I think it's part of our responsibility to keep parents informed. That's who we communicate with. Towns communicate with other voters as well, I'm sure. I've received notifications, calls from the town of West Greenwich on different items.
Really?
So I would be, I guess I'm just questioning why this? Why is it just this and not all communication?
Well, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked it. One, I'm not aware of any West Greenwich specific events that are being advertised by our email. Next, the email list only should contain parents and or guardians that are currently have children that are or children or students active in the school department. I'm sure that it's flushed, right, at the end of graduation. So to answer your question, that particular subgroup, in that case, parents, have an undue advantage over, say, senior citizens, which is me, right? I'm a senior citizen. As far as that, not so much the content of the text, but also, hey, today's the day you can vote, right? I mean, the voting laws in this country are pretty much uniform in the sense that all people participate on some equal playing level, which is not what you're advocating, Ms. Monroe. You're advocating that we should give an advantage to parents whose kids are actually in the facility, who are actually benefiting from the school department. I don't think that's quite consistent with the 14th Amendment, which is equality before the law, not to mention, you know, I can't imagine that's like going into the state of Texas and saying, you know, hey, you know, only the people in Dallas need to vote on a particular day. No, that's not how we do things in this country. We inform everybody equally, and we can't do that. Since we can't do that with our equipment because we don't provide, we don't have a comprehensive email list for everybody in these two towns, we shouldn't do it at all. If you can't treat everybody equally, that is, notify everybody on the day of the all-day referendum to go vote, then you can't tell anybody.
So I think you're expanding well beyond the scope of the school committee. But if we look at the responsibility of the school committee is to the school community, right? So I would make the argument that a flu clinic is equally as important to senior citizens as it is to the school community, but our purview is the school community. That's who we communicate with. So again, it just feels really confusing as a school committee member who's part of creating a budget for the school committee to not want to build awareness for the school community to go and vote.
So I'll take one moment to respond to that, and that I would agree that there is a school community, and the 99.99% of the responsibility of our school department and the school committee is to see that our children get educated. They get educated based on the vehicle, which we call a budget, right? But in this regard, this is where you and I disagree, is that everyone in the entire community, those that are involved in the school system directly, i.e. parents or guardians, versus say senior citizens, they're not all participating in the school department. And since we can't give everybody the benefit, like I said, of, hey, today's the day to vote. If anybody needs that, it's senior citizens, right? Not necessarily younger people, but certainly senior citizens need a notification, and they're not being given that. That's simply because, you know, as our school system executes, we do not have a comprehensive list of email addresses to notify everybody. Therefore, you're giving one particular group whose how shall I say, interests in the budget are dramatically different than another. So you're saying, hey, you know what? I mean, you know, you guys don't need to know over here that today we're going to vote on the budget, but you guys over here, you do. I don't know how you can draw that line. I think that's discriminatory by definition. It's like almost, you know, I don't know how you can discriminate one group over another as far as giving them the benefit of a notification on the day of an election. I think that's Jim Crow. Anyway, go ahead.
So I think from a 14th Amendment standpoint, it has to be when the government denies a right to an individual. No one in either town is being denied the right to vote on these referendums. They are being announced in their towns. They're being advertised publicly. Everybody knows that they're happening. This is an additional service saying that it is happening. You have said yourself that we educate our children through the budget. This is a way for people to vote on that budget, either for or against. Everyone has the opportunity to vote on the budget. This is not giving anyone any additional advantage. You can go to the poll and you cannot. It is a reminder, and it is not from the government that is allowing the voting to occur. It is from a school committee. We do not establish the elections. We do not make the elections happen. We simply work on
We
the
certainly
budget.
do.
No, I'm
Oh, we
afraid that-
identify the date, young lady.
Excuse me, I didn't say that we didn't identify the date. We are not the board of canvassers. We are not the ones that do this. Please let me finish.
I didn't say
Thank you.
anything just then. I may have an expression, but that shouldn't be confused with interrupting you, which is what I just did. And as chair, young lady, I can interrupt you anytime I want. Now continue.
I don't really think that's how it works, but I'll continue just the same.
Read.
So as I was saying, you say through the budget is how we educate our children, but yet you don't want people to know about the budget. You also said that it affects the parents of these children more than it affects other people. However, the budget affects all of our taxes, whether you're a senior, whether you're an old person, whether you're a young person, whether you're an unemployed person. If you're paying taxes in these towns, the school budget affects that because it ultimately relates back to your taxes. So there is no discrimination here. That is not what Jim Crow is. That is not the purpose of the 14th Amendment. This is simply an additional notification. Hopefully each town sends out information. Andrea, Member Monroe was referring to the fact that West Greenwich does reach out to all of its voters in writing and often by phone to let us know what's happening. Hopefully every town in the state can do that for their citizens as well. Perhaps they can, perhaps they can't. I'm not here to judge them, but this is what we receive. So until we get to see a copy of the existing email communication policy that is in existence, I was told that there is one. I don't think we can really move ahead because the other one might already address this. Thank you.
So we identify the date of the all-day referendum, not the Board of Canvassers. Correction
We
there.
don't run the election.
We identify the
A
date.
date
of the-
is not the election.
How many times are you going to interrupt me? So I think we're even at this point. We identify the date. If you want to have multiple all-day referendums, that is a decision of the school committee, and we can do that. Therefore, we identify the all-day referendum date. I would bring to your attention, which I don't know where you were, but in the 1920 budget, we had our all-day referendum not in April, but we had it in June 30th. So we identify as a school committee the date of, so you're not correct there. As far as the 14th Amendment essentially says equality before the law. We are all treated and we are all part of the government. You are the respective government of the town of West Greenwich and we are the respective government of Exeter. And therefore, I have a responsibility to the senior citizens of the town of Exeter. If you interrupt me one more time, I will eject you from this room, Mr. Kissinger. Silence. As I said, my responsibility are for all the individuals in the town of Exeter, not just the parents and not just the students when it comes to the budget. We are the government of the towns of Exeter and West Greenwich respectfully. So if you deny the right of senior citizens to get a notification, you acting as a member of the government of West Greenwich are doing so.
I thought we were here representing the school committee, the district.
I'm glad to see you're confused. Ms.
The
Candy,
district of the towns combined. No, and I'm not here working for one or the other.
Sure.
That becomes problematic. And
I
I do
know who you're
understand the 14th Amendment, and I'm just saying, we can set the date all we want. The Board of Canvassers is the one that oversee the election process. Thank you.
Ms. Pandy,
I don't
did
know.
did you want to be recognized? All right,
We have somebody over here, though.
Yeah, I think we're.
John, go ahead.
I was a little torn on this one as a parent with kids in the district. I knew I had a misunderstanding as well. I thought it was, reminders that kind of encourage the voting of one way or another. And, I'm torn in that, I have kids in the district, and I also want, the quality of, information sharing and voting. So this is a tough one. I think that, maybe there is a policy out there that needs to be looked at a little bit more closely if this is being addressed. And I know that that was not my original thought going in here, but that's kind of where I'm coming from now. Or maybe there's something out there already that maybe we can review, enhance, augment, or something like that allows for information sharing, but does not kind of sway the populace one way or the other. That's kind of my.
So we are never going to have the ability to notify anybody but the parents of the district, right? That's it. All we can do with the electronic equipment, because we are not allowed to maintain a running email address of every individual in our two communities. You just can't do it. If you go in out there and created some policy or law, first of all, it's a policy. Policies are limited to those individuals that participate in the school department. So we can't actually ask people for their email addresses, for their contact information, because in one regard, the execution of in part of the notification does come with the cooperation of the two towns. So every address that is taxable in the town, we get a copy of an address, mind you, not an email address, but an address, and that's when we send out the notification of the all-day referendum, which basically says through 40 days from now we will have an all-day referendum. On top of that, here comes the electronic notification that only goes to like 20% of the population of the overall population, which are those people that participate in the school department. It will never be otherwise. We are not ever going to be a repository for everybody's email address. So you can either have a notification that goes to those people that participate in the educational system, which is okay. That's not the issue here. You can certainly tell parents when, school's out early or it's not going to be at all. That's perfectly legitimate. But the problem that we're having here is we're using that by the employees of the district, employees, mind you, to send a message without authorization of the school committee and telling them, in spite of what the members from West Greenwich seem to think over there, that there's an advocation of an opinion here. Because I can remember with great clarity, they were advocating for passage of the budget, along with the fact that the real issue here is that they get the benefit of that notification, right? That the other 80% of the population doesn't get. So who remembers from a leaflet they got 40 days earlier, other than the national election, to go out on April, whatever the day is, to vote for the all-day referendum? But the outcome, the actual population, outcomes have been pretty sad lately. Just a couple of hundred voters, So, to be honest with you, of that 200 voters, how many of those are people that actually directly participate in the school department? So I think it's discriminatory against senior citizens who don't have kids actively in the school department, that we're giving parents the benefit of this equipment paid for by all senior citizens and younger people who don't have kids in the school department. We don't give them that benefit, but we burden them with the tax burden of the outcome of that result. So we're never going to be the repository for all emails. because it would be just too hard and be too difficult to keep updated email addresses and things. So it's always going to be as it is today if you're going to continue. I'm going to recognize Member Pandy.
I just want to mention for the school committee members who are new. So Jim, just remind me, so the community's got, I believe, 2 mailings. They got the one with the dates of the town financial meeting, the voting day, etc. So they got all the dates, that's our first one.
Correct.
And then we subsequently send out closer to the election or all the referendum, we send out a mailing of factual information regarding our budget, explaining it.
Correct.
That's 2. We also put up signs at each town hall, each school.
Ms. Pandy, please
And-
get to the point here because
I'm
that's
making
not
point
the
that
issue.
Senior citizens have
Get
plenty
to the
of-
point
have plenty
here.
of
It's about
notice of
electronic
You're
notifications.
not
I don't
sharing
care
that
if they're
information.
writing
You're
paper
not-
and sending it
stop
out on
interrupting
people
me. You're not
airplanes.
sharing that
Stick to the
information with your
point.
members.
Stick to the
You're
point.
not, I can say what I want. You're not
Let's
sharing
stick to the
informa-
point.
You're not sharing that information with any of the members. All you
Stick
say
to
is
the
they
point,
get
Ms.
one
Pandy.
notice.
I'm asking
40
you to
Okay, I'm
stick to the
correcting
point.
them.
What's the
You
subject
said
and
the
motion that's
citizens
on the
get one
floor?
notice 40 days before the all-day referendum.
I'm not your husband, Miss
I'm
Pandy.
correcting that.
Lower your
I don't
voice.
yell at my husband.
Do I, what?
I don't yell at my husband.
Thank God, I know my place in the world.
And then there's also reminders on our signs in schools. There's plenty of reminders for our senior citizens. And and it goes into the newspaper. So there's plenty of reminders for our senior citizens. And there's absolutely no reason why a school district can't send out a reminder to the email addresses that we have for the families. There's absolutely no reason. And you're on the school committee, you should be promoting the school committee, which you never do. And you should be.
You promote the town of West
I
Greenwich,
wanna-
lady.
I don't. And I.
That's who you promote
I wanna-
around here.
I'd like you to share with the school committee the last time you actually voted to approve our school budget. Because I don't even recall you ever.
If I thought you could perform math, you'd never.
You have.
If you're done,
You have
Ms. Griffiths, please.
underlying
Thank
reasons
you,
why you
you're
want
done.
this on the agenda. You don't want
Ms.
our budget to
Griffiths.
pass. That's
Thank
your
you.
reason.
Would it be possible to see the prior year's communications and also the existing email policy? That way we can clarify exactly what was said and exactly what that policy is before we go anywhere else. Perhaps it was a certain way one year, perhaps it was a certain way other years, but if this is what we're basing it upon, we do need to see it before any decisions are made. Otherwise, we don't really know. Thank you.
So I'd like to remind everyone, the point here is not what was said, but rather, and I do remember what was said, to be quite frank and honest.
You don't remember statistics very well.
There's that gentleman from Greenwich. Stay after the meeting, we'll talk.
I don't know
Yes.
what the prior one said, so everyone might have institutional knowledge about and remembering what it said, but I haven't seen them all, so I'd like to see them, please.
And how would the text sent out on these, because I don't know if they have them all, how would they,
Because if they are not
if,
advocating for a certain position, then we would know that there's not an issue there. And it's not the 14th Amendment enforcing a law that's abriding anyone's privilege or denying them due process of law or removing equal protection of the laws. It's a reminder. Thank you.
it's a reminder. It's a reminder that you do not give to everyone. Yes,
Reminders
John.
don't have to go to everyone.
So, thank you. Pause. John,
As I said before, as a parent, I think I'm inclined to agree that I think we need to see just to make sure, because I don't want a partisan message going out to all or a subset of either town to say vote this way, vote that way, or a hint to vote one way or the other. I think information is important. I think people have various ways to consume it or to get it, and as long as it's a non-biased way to present the information, like, vote here today or, cast your vote. I mean, I just think we need to see the, that's kind of where I came in, reading the agenda with one, perspective in my head, and hearing this conversation today, and it's just, I just think we need to see what's been said before, what the policy dictates currently today is my thought.
Somebody texted me a picture of the policy that currently exists, policy 3901, which I don't have the entire text of it, but there is already section 4 of that policy calls for all media materials that are circulated to be both neutral and factual. So we have a policy that's in existence, and what we produce from our office is factual and neutral. But if people want to see it, if that's what the word is, we'll bring samples of what we've done with all the existing policies.
So in none of your text information that came from either your office or a principal, did it ever say support the budget? Is that what you're telling me?
Anything that came from my office is a reminder to vote.
How about the principal? So if you return the text, I would expect Jeremy to return all the text that had been sent out by that system. That includes the principals, and I know of at least 2 principals that sent out a text along with others. So do you have every text that was ever sent out by our school system over the last 5 years?
Through that system?
I thought we, well, no, that's a question. I remember you updated the system a couple of years ago.
They have everything we've sent out with the current system since we switched to Apogee.
I didn't hear that.
We have everything we've sent out with the current system, yes.
How long has the current system been
Well,
in
before
place?
this system, we didn't have a system, so. it was just-
So you never texted? So you only had this one system that notifies people via their phone or something? All right. And it doesn't have to go through, say, the administration office, anybody. So for example,
Principals have
yeah.
privileges to communicate with their school communities, yeah.
So only their school?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to correct myself. I did one time send out a communication that had additional information. It was a response to a false flyer that was sent out by one of our towns. That was before the budget, and I simply responded with false information that was circulated to members of one town and not the other, encouraging them not to vote for the school budget based on information that was not at all factual. So I did send a response out to that.
So John, you're not going to support this motion?
I think, just hearing what I heard today, and, coming in with one thought, and just hearing the room and the commentary and the arguments and the for and against, I'm not sure that I would be able to.
Okay, John. So I'm going to, go ahead, Mike.
Well, why don't we just wait till next month, get a reprint of what's been going around, and then make a decision then?
Sure. So I will withdraw the motion at this time. And in the next meeting, I expect to see every text that was ever turned out by the school department as it relates to the all-day referendum sent by either a principal, a vice principal, a superintendent, and the policy as it relates. But keep in mind here, from my perspective, I believe that the essence here is the notification. In other words, it isn't the information. At the best, you can say the information is redundant. It's the timeliness of the information. In other words, if that notification goes out 8 hours before the polls close, which is what's happening or had happened on one occasion, as well as the day before, that's an advantage that's pretty hard to overcome by those individuals that don't get the notification. So needless to say, I am so glad you have all helped me understand your positions when it comes to senior citizens in our towns. All right. So we will
Can I ask
defer
one other
this until the next meeting.
Carmen,
Put it on maybe.
can I request one other item?
Not really.
Yes, you can.
All right. we're
I think
moving
it
on.
would be helpful to know what the policies are in other school districts. If when they are sending out notifications similar to this, if they are notifying just the school community. As an employee of a university, I get notified of a reminder to vote when my school is being impacted. So I'd like to just understand that from a statewide perspective, if we have some kind of information like that.
Is that 3 school systems? It's like Charahoe. Do they have an all-day? Charahoe has an all-day referendum. We do. Bristol Warren, do they have an all-day referendum?
Bristol Warren does, I believe.
So.
I think any kind of reminders to vote.
So
whether or
it
not
sounds
to-
like, well, of course, the school department is a line item to the overall budget in every other city and town, except for those regional school districts. So it would be ourselves, of course, Bristol Warren and Charahoe. I don't know if, what's the other one? Pontiac. So
The other item is
I'm
this
sorry.
is a very
I-
vague agenda item, and we aren't being sent any
Excuse me,
information.
ladies, you have this bad problem of not recognizing the authority of the chair in this meeting. I understand where you may have this trouble, but before you speak, you should be recognized by the chair.
I was
We
just
call that
recognized.
courtesy. And secondly, we've already moved on to the next topic. I
We
can't
didn't. I
understand
was
what's
in the
going
middle
on
of
with you
asking my
ladies.
question. You recognize me and I'm still speaking, but you speak over
I don't
me.
recognize you at all. I didn't recognize you at all. I said the topic is closed. It was subject to I said we're going to put it on the next agenda, and the material is going to be brought forth by the superintendent regarding policy, the text that was sent out, and also the other 3 regional districts and how they deal with electronic notifications. So we're going to see what the other districts do. That's where I left it. Thank you. At least they're not writing policies about you like they were doing with me, ladies. All right. On. Review and authorize acceptance of proposals for the Westerly Community Credit Union Teacher Grants. Discussion, approval, action. Jim.
So the 2 additional credit union proposals are the steel band startup, the write-ups are in the packet. That is so that we can have a junior, senior high school steel band as just an additional musical ensemble at our junior, senior high school. And then the story walk at Lynham with the purpose of strengthening family engagement and promoting literacy. So those are the 2 projects. The write-ups are included in your packet. Yes.
I just think that we are so fortunate to have Greg Charles in our music department. I didn't realize he does steel band stuff too. He should do everything.
The steel band actually performed for us at our opening day event that we had outside. Beginning of the school year. Very talented.
And I know also the other one that Alyssa there put in, a lot of libraries have the same storybook walk thing. In fact, we've been talking about it at Exeter Library. It's a really good program.
Do we need a motion? Do we need a motion? Thank you. Make that a
Yeah,
motion.
I'll make a motion to accept it. Can I do them both together or separate?
Why don't you do them separately since they're on the agenda separately?
To authorize the acceptance of proposal for the Westerly Community Credit Union Teacher Grant Steel Band Startup.
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstentions, nays, motion carries. Next.
I'll make a motion to authorize acceptance of proposal for the Westerly Community Credit Teacher Grant for outdoor learning story walk.
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstentions, nays, motion carries. Yeah. So next is our RICAS. I'm going to move out of the way. Because I don't want to be
Oh,
blind.
I don't want to be in the middle of the picture.
So it goes switch, goes home. I see. Oh. Go on.
Okay, so I've been asked to do a brief presentation overview on the results of our RICAS test. These were the tests that were administered during the 2021 school year, the pandemic year. And I have made copies of this presentation that are at the table, so you can follow along, school committee members on the copy. And it's also presented on the screen and shared with a virtual audience as well. The first few slides just talk about the key messages that were released from the Department of Education when they sent out their 200-page report on the state assessment results. I've pulled those key messages just as a reminder. The Department of Ed is referring to what's called the COVID effect. Obviously, makes a lot of sense that as a result of disruptions in learning, hybrid models, kids choosing to be on virtual for the entire year. A lot of kids did not have access to in-person learning to the degree that they have in a typical year, and that, of course, has impacted results across the state. Some of the statistics, 27% of students who are mostly in person, which they define, the Department of Ed defines as greater than 75% of school days in person. Were proficient on RICAS math versus only 13% of students who were mostly virtual, which is defined as less than 25%. So while we had children who had access to their education, whether that education was in person or through an online model, there is a really big difference in proficiency rates in both subjects, and that's the statewide statistics. That's not Exeter West Greenwich, this is statewide. Same thing happened in ELA, 39% of students who were mostly in person proficient versus only 26% of students who are mostly virtual. So double digit, really significant differences in proficiency rates based on the model of We know that student performance declined across the state in both subjects. The steepest declines were in math. That actually was consistent with all of the other states that administered state assessments. And I'll just say that the majority of states did not. The three states that RIDE has talked a lot about are Connecticut and Massachusetts and also Tennessee. Those three states administered their full state assessment as well. And in all of those states, math was impacted far more significantly than ELA. And then the other consideration is participation. So statewide participation on the comprehensive assessment system, the RICAS, declined by 10% over the 2018-19 year, which is the last year that they were administered. In 1920, there was no administration of state tests really anywhere. And then, as I think has been indicated before, the profile of the students who didn't participate varies tremendously from district to district. And so those students, depending on their profile, that has an impact on results. So for example, in our district, and I referenced this in some of the other slides, we know that a large majority of the kids that did not participate were children who were 100% virtual, whose parents did not want to send them to in-person learning and then chose not to send them for the test. And a lot of those children have been historically high-performing children on previous administrations of our state test. So we had a large chunk of kids who did not contribute to the overall performance of the district because they chose not to participate. And then the other message is that this last bucket, actually the previous bucket of funding, the ESSER, they call it the ESSER funding, and then the new bucket of funding that they have not released to us yet. The rules are that we have to align our requests to the needs as identified by both district information and the state assessment information. What you will see is that the places that we've targeted our money already are the right places, and our state assessment scores confirm that for us. And it also gives us some information about other areas that we need to look at. Okay, let's get into the schools. So this is about ELA proficiency. And I'm trying to keep this simple. We have the state ELA proficiency rate in 2018-19, that was at 38.5%. And last school year, it went down to 33.2%, which is a decline of 5.3%. That's the percentage of children who took the test who were deemed to be overall proficient. At Metcalf, in 18-19, we were at 43.9%, and in 2021, we actually went up 4.7%. So the proficiency rate of our children at Metcalf went up 4.7%, and that is in spite of the fact that we had about 1 out of every 3 kids who were 100% virtual. And we had a decrease in participation, and we know that the profile of many of those kids were the high-performing kids. So it's really a really good statistic for us to look at. The state went down almost 5% or over 5%. We went up almost 5%. Therefore, if you put those together, it's like a 10% gain as compared to how the state did in the pandemic year. So it's pretty exciting. I've referenced in the past our work on the new ELA curriculum in both reading and writing. Teachers have worked hard, administrators have worked hard, and that's been underway now for a couple of years. So we want to at least give credit to the fact that we've made some moves over the past several years that I think are finally starting to take hold and having an impact. So this is really something for us to celebrate. In math, across the state, the percentage of the proficiency rate went down just about 10%, 9.7%, from 29.8% proficient, it's pretty sad, down to 20.1% proficient. So only 1 in 5 kids statewide proficient in math. Metcalf started at 47.4%. We did see a decline. Again, that's consistent, a steeper decline toward math. However, we went down to 41.1%, which is a 6.3% decline in proficiency. So while we did see a decline, it is less than what the state declined. Obviously, this is something that we identified already, because if you recall, when we were approving the ESSER 2 expenses, or when I reported out on the ESSER 2 expenses, one of our focus areas was Metcalf math. And we have some additional supports that are in place already. And so these scores pretty much tell us that what we've targeted is the right area. We also will be moving forward with high quality math curriculum materials. The money has been earmarked with the ESSER 3. That was, I think it was Andrea, your recommendation during the budget process last year, that we look at those ESSER funds for the curriculum materials. It was an allowable expense. So we've kind of earmarked those ESSER 3 funds for the same expense next year, and that is legislated. We must do new curriculum adoptions across the district, and we now have money that will help us to support that. So that's a move that will be happening in the next year. I wanted to take a look at grade 6 because we focused a lot as a school committee on grade 6, which is the culminating year at Metcalf. And if you look at this in 2018-19 in ELA, grade 6 performance only, we were at 31.3% proficient. And in 2020-21, we are now at 51.5% proficient in grade 6. Granted, it is a different group of students, but the culminating year at Metcalf has gone from a 31% proficiency rate to a 51% proficiency rate, which is pretty remarkable. There is still something for us to look at. It's highlighted on your copy, where there is a real big discrepancy between the performance of females and the performance of males in grade 6. I will say that that is not consistent across all grade levels, but it is something that is obviously noticeable in grade 6. So that's something that we want to look at. In math, look at that, 30.6% proficient in 2018-19. And last year during the pandemic year, 56.3% of our children in grade 6 were proficient. So that culminating year, we're looking at a 26% increase in proficiency rates in grade 6. That's the final year at Metcalf. So pretty impressive. There's not as much of a gender gap in math. We're looking at over 50%, 54% of males and 58.5% of females that are proficient, pretty close. But in ELA, it is something for us to look at. Okay. And this is something that we're really proud of. We've been focusing a lot on our students with disabilities. And you can see that across the state, in 2018-19, only 6% of children with disabilities were proficient on the state test. And that went down about 1% during the 2021 administration. It went from 6.1% to 5.3%. But at Metcalf, in 2018-19, we reported that 0% of our children with disabilities were proficient. And now we're up to almost 10%. So again, during the pandemic year, we're looking at beginning to close that gap with our children who have the most significant needs. So the state went down and we went up, significantly went up. And this is one of the things that we've identified in our strategic plan. It's something that I know the schools have been working really hard on. The special education director and her staff have been working really hard on this as well. Similarly in math, while the overall scores went down, look what happened at Metcalf. The state went from 5% proficient down to 3.4% proficient. These are just children with disabilities across the state, but at Metcalf, 5% to 12.5% proficient. So an increase and something that as we were reviewing our data, this is something that's pretty proud of. Okay. There are some areas for continued growth, and I've highlighted them just really quickly. We've already set pretty rigorous proficiency goals in our strategic plan that the school committee has reviewed and approved. When we look at grade level specific data, there are some disparities in particular subgroups when you compare certain grades to other grades. So I kind of highlighted that with the gender gap in grade 6, but that gender gap does not exist in other grade levels. So as grade level teams, we're beginning to look at the data and we're looking a little bit deeper than just overall proficiency. How did the boys do? How did the girls do? How did students with disabilities do? How about students from households that are economically disadvantaged? And there are some disparities from grade level to grade level that our teams are beginning to look at. The same thing is true when you look within specific grade levels and you look teacher to teacher. There are sometimes disparities from classroom to classroom within the same grade level. So that's another layer of analysis that we have the ability to do. And our principals and grade level teams are working on that now. Because if we can support certain groups of kids and certain groups of teachers to increase proficiency rates, then it will, of course, have an impact on the school and the district as well. So that's something that we're doing. I've already talked about the high quality curriculum, and we have referenced, I know I've put it in my status report, that our classroom and special educators, reading specialists, and all of the school administrators, and that includes myself, the curriculum director, the special ed director, we are all participating in the science of reading training, which when all is said and done is about 160 hours worth of training. It's a very rigorous course, really designed to increase our capacity to respond to the learning needs of both emerging and struggling learners in reading. So this is something that we know is going to support us going forward. Now we're going to move to the junior high school. So this first slide is a little bit alarming, but bear with me for a minute. We know that the secondary schools were the ones that were hit the hardest. So if we look at the profiles of secondary schools across the state, these are where the greatest declines in proficiency occurred. And it's pretty consistent with that trend that kids who were not in school for in-person learning as much had a greater decline in performance. Well, at the secondary schools, because of all the protocols that we had to follow, at the very best, our kids were only in every other day because of the hybrid model, and then they were home on the opposite day. Remember, we had the town days, like sort of went to school on one day and West Greenwich on the other day. And then we also had a high percentage of children at the secondary schools who chose 100% virtual as well. So we had a very large percentage of children who were not in school for the majority of time. But by the way, so did most other secondary schools. So that's why we see this greater decline. Okay. So when we look at the scores for our junior high school, we were at 71% proficient in 18-19, 41.5% proficient in 2021. That looks alarming. Except that what I did is I wanted to see where were these same cohorts of children 2 years ago. So for the kids that were in grade 7 last year, they were in grade 5 during the 2018-19 school year. And the state assessment results in ELA for grade 5 at that point were 30.4% of the children in that grade level were proficient. The same group of kids in 2020-21 were in grade 7, and we're at 41.5% proficient. So when you follow the cohort, even though when you look at the overall proficiency rate of the school, when you follow the cohort, these are a group of kids that when they were in elementary school and they were in Metcalf, there was a really low proficiency rate, and it actually went up during the pandemic year, double digits. The same thing is true for the children who were in grade 6 in 2018-19, in grade 8 last year, when they were tested, went from 31.3% proficient to 41.5% proficient. So yes, we want to look at proficiency, we want to increase proficiency rates at the junior high school, but it's to get the big picture, you need to not just look at comparing a totally different group of students, but what is the progression been over time? And this is good. Math was impacted significantly, again, more significantly at the secondary schools because of the lack of in-person learning. And we know that there were some additional efforts that were made during 2018-19 when we had a normal school year around increasing motivation, helping the children become really familiar with the technology platform that the state test is administered on. Those things did not happen last year. And we see that the overall proficiency has declined. So we think that that has a little bit to do with it as well. And that's something that we know we need to put back in place this year and beyond. We also know, and I talk about this in the, actually the next slide. Areas for continued growth, in a lot of ways, they remain the same as what we identified for Metcalf, looking at the data trends across grade levels and looking at subgroups, for example. We are in the process of implementing a new ELA curriculum that's actually in place right now. That was something that the school committee authorized, and we use the funds from ESSER 2. We are in the process of selecting the math curriculum, the high-quality math curriculum that's happening right now, looking for implementation next school year. There is the science of reading training that's happening at the secondary schools as well. And every teacher is getting something. These teachers that I've identified are the ones doing the full mastery training, and then everybody else has to have a different level of training in the science of reading. Again, this was all legislated, but we have that going. And then I have talked about the new schedule, which we were really excited about at the junior high school for the first time since I've been here, and for a long time before that. We now offer math and ELA at the junior high school every day for an hour. It used to be every other day for 80 minutes. So we've actually increased instructional time in both of the tested areas by 100 minutes per week, every week of the school year. And we're looking at different curriculum. So that there's a lot that's happening already. And moving to the everyday math, for example, is something that I know many parents have been asking for a long time. And we made it happen prior to the start of this school year. So we're excited about that. And then when we do finally put the plan, when we submit the plan for the use of the ESSER 3 funds, we know based on the scores at the junior high school, particularly in math, that we have to use those funds to do something more to address math proficiency at the secondary schools, and we will do that once the application is released, which it has not been. And then we've been told not to really compare ourselves to other communities because every community experienced COVID in a really different way. But just so that you get a sense of the impact, it was not just Exeter West Greenwich that was impacted, although for us, we actually had areas of improvement. But I've given you some examples of some of our surrounding communities and the overall impact in their district in both ELA and math. You can see some of the communities that have traditionally been very, very high performing dropped by 20 percentage points, roughly 20 percentage points proficiency rates in both math and ELA, or one or the other. I mean, it's pretty substantial across the board. And you can see I selected schools that we're typically compared to, just so that you can see the impact was broad. But also, it did not affect us to the same degree that it has impacted a lot of the communities that we're typically compared to. Okay. So I'm happy to provide additional data as we continue to move through the analysis process. I'm happy to answer questions. And just so that you know, I am meeting with principals next week to review a process that we're going to use to analyze these results at the deepest level. And then principals will be working with their staff, although they've already started to, but to continue to work with their staff at drilling down to those more granular levels to get at some of the issues that we're identifying through the data, and also what the action steps are grade by grade, classroom by classroom, so that we can continue to see levels of improvement. Hopefully post-COVID, those improvements will begin to go up at a much more substantial rate. So that's what I have. Questions? Sure. Andrew?
Last year, when we were talking about stimulus money related to COVID, one of the ideas you had thrown out was the possibility of an extended day and providing after-school support, specifically in literacy and math. And I know that hasn't happened yet, but is there funds to do something like that?
So again, we can use the ESSER 3 funds once they're finally released to do a lot of things. In fact, I didn't say this because the YCAS test is not administered at the high school level, but the schedule at the high school was also adjusted, so there is this block of time at the end of the day for kids to receive additional supports, and it's within the school day, so that we're not relying on kids who have to stay after school. We know a lot of the kids at the secondary level, for example, work, play sports, so they wouldn't be able to access it. So that schedule change at the high school has happened. There are some funding needs that go along with what we're offering during that block of time, so that will be included. We also do have some funds available for after-school support at the elementary schools. And we don't need to tap into ESSER, at least yet, because we received a community-based grant. I know I talked about it, it might even be before you joined the school committee, but we did receive a community-based grant. That's a local community member who, through the Family Foundation, provided some support for us for after-school activities. We never used all of the funding because we had to stop everything when COVID hit. So we have this bank of money that's still there, and we've been given permission to continue to use it for its intended purpose. In fact, just this week, I asked our treasurer to give me a rundown on exactly what's left in each of those areas. So we have that very conversation, particularly on Metcalf, because we know that we have some kids that continue to struggle. We have a lot of supports in place, but you know, it's going to be a multi-year process to get every kid back to where they would have been less than pandemic.
I mean,
So
I think it's really positive that curriculum changes for all of the kids, but I think, as a former classroom teacher, when you are trying to get all of the kids, even the ones who are significantly struggling, then the other kids aren't able to advance. So if we can target specific areas of needs with specific children, whether that's within the day or after school.
And I will say this too, at Metcalf, just as an example, so that you know that we're on the same page. When we put the additional math specialist in place through ESSER, because we knew that math was an area of need, we are providing supports to the kids that are struggling, but we've also identified a group of kids at every grade level, and all the grade level teams have met to talk about this. But who are the kids that are already at where they need to be and really are ready to be challenged? And so we've identified what's called the math challenge group at every grade level, and they are working also with the math specialist to kind of ramp up their math skills, even though they're already at the highest level of achievement. So we've thought about kids at both ends of the spectrum in providing these additional support. Some of it is already happening, and then we do have some funding, which I think we're gonna really target literacy, because that's where we're seeing a need without as many supports as, for example, we have in math at this point. So good point.
We'll also just add, since nobody else is asking questions, I was looking at the RIDE assessment website where you can look at other districts. And, we still are, when you're looking at our neighboring communities and looking at our proficiency levels, we're doing pretty well in comparison. So I think that there's always room for improvement, but we fared very well over the pandemic, which is impressive considering.
There are a lot of positive messages, and the things that we've identified as areas for continued growth and things for us to address. There was nothing that surprised us, which is also a good sign, because we're trying to stay on top of this and really provide the support. So we didn't want to wait for the results of the assessment to come out before we decided what we needed to do. I think we had a pretty good handle on that even before we saw the results. But there's definitely areas for improvement. Definitely. There's areas for us to be celebrating, I think, despite the circumstances of the last year. 2 years now, almost. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Uh, 21-22 school committee presentation schedule.
So this is in the packet, and we've identified the schools that will present at the various school committee meetings. That's something that we've typically done every year. Although last year, I do believe we only had one school that was able to present before that was shut down. But schools have been notified and they'll begin their presentations on March.
Do you need a motion?
Yes.
Motion to approve the 21-22 school committee presentation schedule as presented. Second,
Second.
all those in questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Nay, abstentions, that motion passes. Fund to transfer pay from compulsory school committee time accident insurance. This was for about $8,000. Bob?
So this is just the follow-up to the previous school committee, the discussion, and on the back of the correspondence to the school committee, you can see the outline of what the school time, compulsory school time insurance provides to the community, to the students. And then the question, I believe, from the chairperson was, where would the funds come from? And this would be after looking at our insurance lines, there is not enough to cover the expense of this. So this is a new expense for the committee. It would be an assignment of $8,295 from the unassigned general fund balance to pay for compulsory.
I'll make the motion to assign $8,295 from unassigned general fund balance to pay for the compulsory school time insurance for all students for the coverage of the period October 27, 2021 to August 22nd, 2022. I need a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
I have a question. It's for both, well, it's for both Jimmy and Bob. So, Jimmy, looking at the amendment in red, I know that's a policy yet, but you included 1, 2, and 3 for events, so the athletic, academic, and field trips. So Bob, I just want to make sure that coverage is special activities rider. It covers academic events and field trips also. Just want to confirm that.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
That'll help me when we get to let's see. Okay, good. And I want to thank you for doing that optional coverage.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah.
and
A little
prepared
price
for-
drop in that too. So that's nice.
Yeah, good. That was excellent. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's good.
Any other question? All right. Motion's on the floor. All those in favor say aye. Second. I'm sorry. Abstentions, nays, motion passes. Policy review amendment, adoption, deletion, policy 8604. Jim?
So 8604 was the student travel policy, and based on the conversations that we had last meeting about students transporting themselves because of the lack of drivers and the lack of buses. And then the conversation as it's connected to the insurance that we just the request was to go to that policy and make sure that it is consistent with what we're currently doing and consistent with the vote on the insurance. So the only adjustment is on page 2 under section 5. Basically, it says, in the absence of available school buses, only as a last resort, with permission from parents, eligible high school students may be granted permission to self-transport. Category 1, 2, or 3 events, the district shall secure an additional insurance waiver for all students that covers athletic and extracurricular participation, including transportation to and from approved events, which the committee just approved, based on the work that Bob has done. That is the only adjustment that was necessary. The rest of the policy should stay. As current. So we just need a motion to recommend
Then here. What do you need a motion for?
the approval of the amended policy.
I'll make a motion to approve the amended policy 604 student travel.
I'll second it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Nay, abstentions. Motion passes. Unfinished business.
Jim, if that's right, one, ask Mr. Ross a question.
Already?
Just because there was that heavy condition as to why we passed the policy amendment, you'll send that policy to the insurance company? What's that?
Unfinished business. Item A, Exeter West Greenwich School Committee versus Exeter. I have a motion for that. And I keep those stuff, which I squirreled away. I move to have the EWG School Committee authorize the district solicitor to engage in settlement negotiations with the Exeter Town Solicitor in the matter of Exeter West Greenwich School Committee versus the Town of Exeter, and to return to the school committee with potential settlement options to be considered by the committee. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion. Members? Oh, wait a minute. You know what? If unless the membership doesn't mind, I'd like to get an explanation for the committee at large from our solicitor. Does anyone want to?
Before Attorney Craven
All right,
starts speaking.
go ahead.
My concern was if we're going into negotiations and this is active litigation, if this was something we should have in open session or executive session. I wasn't here for prior actions on this, so I thank everyone for sending the information that was not included initially in it, all the information. Thank you, that was very helpful to put this into perspective, but just considering it is ongoing, I didn't know if that would jeopardize anything. Typically, lawsuits and things like that are kept under wraps until the end. Thank you.
Anyone else?
If you want me to address those things that would not.
Address her concerns and the issue.
When I came into this office 4 months ago, I contacted Jim Ruzak, for someone I've known for 30 years. He's the solicitor at Exeter. The amount in controversy is roughly $34,000. So from that experience in my career as a litigator, I figured we'd spend more than that litigating this case between the two towns. So I said, do you want to talk about it? And he said, I'd love to. So I said, I got to get some authority from the school committee, and that's why I'm here tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Did your concern get addressed?
Mostly, if we're just going into negotiations, I would think that when the negotiations come back, we would do that in executive session.
I would recommend that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else on the membership?
So so Attorney Craven can enter into discussions regarding the settlement. But
Correct.
I personally, I don't know I'm in favor of settlement. So you're going to enter into negotiations, you're come back to the school committee. So I don't, there's questions, I guess, that need to be asked, but I don't think can be asked in this open session.
There are substantive questions, I think, about the applicability of the charter. And that was what I think led to this disagreement to begin with. I can tell you from what little I know, Jim has his position. I've read it, and I'm not sure that I don't disagree with him. But how much, we'll see. And, I'm going to give you a complete hypothetical. Let's say I thought we were 65% right and they were 35% right. But he said, give us $5,000, we'll call it a day. I'd recommend you to do that. And if you're concerned about setting a precedent, the precedent would not be set because it would be an exchange of money for a dismissal with prejudice, which would mean nobody would admit they did anything wrong. And that's what again, that's hypothetical. I'm not saying. Senator.
Kevin Breen, town administrator for West Village, I respectfully ask that the West Village Council listen to it, so brought up the and included in the discussion.
I will.
Thank you.
So my concern with the looking into a settlement in this case, and again, I don't think this should be discussed in open session, but my concern is, it's the charter. So if the all-day referendum fails in April and Exeter is up a little bit in population, West Branch is down a little bit in population, are we going to be back in the same boat? Because Exeter's argument in their filings is they believe they followed all the laws, and you have to follow the charter. The charter didn't apply. So my fear is if we enter into settlement negotiations this year, next year, are we going to be in the same boat?
I can't answer that, but I can tell you that I'd give you a much more informed answer if I had an opportunity to speak to Jim Maruzak about his position. And that might be included in the dismissal stipulation, that they forfeit any other rights, that we agree how a factual situation that presents itself here. If it were to repeat itself next year, we would follow the same tactic, come to some reasonable settlement. Again, I'm just being hypothetical. But I will tell you one thing, when I saw $34,000 of amount of controversy, and the other side, I'm not only did they object to the lawsuit, but they settled that they put forth 53 affirmative defenses. Now that will be in court for a long time dealing with that. So I wanted to drill down, as the superintendent was talking about finding out the problems with math and English. I wanted to drill down and find out if we could come to an agreement as to what the problem is and why they taken the stance they have. Because, as I said, I understand that it came about, the lawsuit came about quickly after Exeter said, we have a different position. Nothing was discussed. A lawsuit was filed within a few days. Why that happened, I can't tell you. I can tell you, Maruzak thought that was bad.
We reached out, and also Bob reached out first. We asked him to reach out, and then I noticed a claim was filed, and then a lawsuit was filed. So it was a lawsuit filed automatically.
Yep.
But I mean, as a school committee, we can't be in the position every year if wondering, I mean, if an all-day referendum doesn't pass and we don't get to one to pass, if we bring it back to the voters, we can't be in a position where we're negotiating with the town to pay what they owe. So that's my fear with the settlement. You know, their biggest argument is that they don't have to comply with the charter. And the other, I know one of their arguments is that West Greenwich paid, you know, they paid extra, if you will. And, you know, West Greenwich didn't pay that because they owed it. West Greenwich paid that because, you know, they said, you know, keep the extra money, do what you need to do with it. In the spirit of supporting the district. So I'm not for entering into settlement negotiations. I am all about negotiating. I do believe in that, and I believe in it with, you know, saving fees for the district. But we shouldn't be in this position to begin with. And I strongly, I'm really opposed to looking into a settlement because this can happen any year. And it could happen in a year where the difference is, you know, $200,000. I mean, that's just, that it's a very bad position to put the school district. It's very bad to put the school district in the position where they have to negotiate for something that's clearly owed to them through the law and through the charter.
You're not giving me authority to settle the case.
No,
Only
it's to
giving me
talk about
authority
it.
to find out what the parameters are and come back and talk to you.
Yeah, but they're still looking to settle. So we're gonna make spending attorney fees for you to do that. And it's just, I can't say enough about how bad it is. I'll see if anybody else wants to speak.
Are there any more questions from the membership or comments? None. All right, I'm going to move the motion at this time. The motion is to, it's what I stated. We have a second on that. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Nay. Abstentions. So motion passes. All right, so next, October 1st enrollment. Bob, that's sounds like you.
Yes, so we're still working with both towns. We had two enrollments in question from Exeter. We've got those resolved. For West Greenwich, there was a little bit, like 7 to 9 students that we had to check on residency. We've got one report that we're waiting on in the next school committee meeting. I'll have the October 1 results.
Questions from the membership? None. Yeah. Charter Review Committee update. I think Bob,
The next meeting is next week, November 16th.
boy, okay. I think that's the only update, right? All right. Any questions or comments from the membership? Next is the 21-22 return to school guidance updates, Jim.
I don't have any new updates. I actually did not bring the numbers broken down by school for positive cases, but we've had in the last 2 week period since our last meeting, we are up to 5 positive cases. Pretty low. I will say that of the 5 positive cases, 3 of them were staff members. And in my communications with surrounding superintendents, a lot of them are beginning to see an uptick right now. And it's pretty consistent with the timeline after Halloween. We haven't, I'm going to knock on wood, we have not seen that at this point. Not saying that we will or will not, but it's something that we're just going to be paying attention to. But right now, we continue to be pretty low in the district compared to where we started.
I would think at Halloween, everyone's wearing a mask.
One mask.
I think what some of the other superintendents said is they got word that there were a lot of families that got together, had like a pre-trick-or-treating house party, teenagers got together. So that's potentially where some of the spread occurred, but it is not across the board, right? So there are some communities that are seeing an increase, and there are others like us that haven't seen any change since Halloween. Hopefully that remains the case for us, but because I got the heads up that that's happening in places around the country, no impact yet.
Regarding the vaccination clinic for COVID, a couple parents had asked, they weren't yet ready to jump on the very quick first date, and then there's a second date. Are we expecting to have other dates?
So this is what I know about this, because just as a reminder, the vaccination clinics are not run by the school district. They just are being offered in one of our facilities. So last night was a vaccination clinic that was open to 5 to 11-year-olds only, and that's because that vaccine is different than the vaccine that would be given to anybody that's 12 or older. Because it was held in Exeter, West Greenwich, does not mean that only Exeter or West Greenwich children could sign up for a slot at that vaccine. Basically, what the Department of Health has said is we're going to offer them in the community, but anybody can sign up any place across the state. So that's something that others should keep in mind. And for example, you know, there are Coventry clinics that are coming up, in Kingstown, depending on where people live, it could even be closer than having to connect back. So that's that. And I also know that they are initially planning on doing 2 clinics in each community first before they start scheduling other school-based clinics. So I don't have any dates or any anticipated follow-up clinics for the first dose. The second clinic is on the 29th. Is going to be offered only to the individuals that came to our first clinic because it's the second dose. So I think they're getting that link to sign up for their appointment for that second date I was told by Ian that it was either going today or tomorrow for those individual families. But just anybody that asked a question, let them know that school-based clinics are beginning to be publicized at all on the Department of Health website. They can pick whichever one they want to go to, pick a slot and go. I suspect if there's still a need or a want, if families are still looking for places to vaccinate their children, there are state clinics that they can go to. But if there's a great need, they'll offer additional ones in certain communities, but not until they've got at least something to take over. That's what I've been told so far. Okay.
Moving on, capital projects update, Bob.
Yep, so in the status report, I had the activity log in the back that brought us up to October 29th. Things are just moving along as planned for the HVAC project. On Saturday, they were here. They put lifted 6 units up onto the rooftop, and they put the associated ductwork in place. So they're beginning to do that. What that does is it opens up the opportunity for the subcontractors and the general contractor to do their work up above on the rooftop during the school day. So they're gaining time there. And then when the students dismiss, they're dropping in and making the connection. So that's all very positive. We're looking at November 17th, which would be next Wednesday, or November 24th, the following Wednesday, for the next building committee meeting. We're just waiting for the approval of the 5th requisition, and that will go before the school committee, before the building committee. Things are moving in, and we're wrapping up. The schedule now is probably end of November. Everything will be tied in and as close to operational as it can be without being fully operational. And then the test for performance as designed will begin probably first week of December.
Questions or comments from the membership? Bob, on the 3 units, did you say they're here or they're up on the roof? I'm sorry, you're mumbling. I can't hear you.
They on site on Saturday, and they put everything up on the roof. So all the picks for the roof are complete.
Okay.
So all the units are in or are on site. They're being connected with each day that goes by.
Okay. And since we're all toasty in the library right now, courtesy of other than my blood pressure, we should be in good shape. Great. All right. So I don't think there are any questions or comments.
I have a question.
Yes.
There was a question, an item on the capital projects plan right now that was kind of up for question about the timing for the greenhouse installation, specific to recruitment for CTE, for the career technical programs. And do we have any specific recruitment events that we host for career programs that, do we know what the dates are for those?
It's in December, actually. It's published for December. I think, for some reason, I think it's December 5th. The open house for the
yeah.
December.
Yeah,
I think it's
coming
December
very
5th. But regardless, what will happen with the greenhouse is because it's going in a different location,
Mhm.
is that the old greenhouse would not get removed until after the new one. So there will be no disruption to the program.
Yeah.
And the best that we can do in December, because that's when schools begin to recruit, is to show them what's coming. And it will be ready for next school year. But we will not have it up in time. Certainly because we have to start recruiting early.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep up with the others.
Okay, I just didn't know if there was any summer events, but that's really helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? So there was an addition put on the agenda that I think you all got under unfinished business, and it's regarding group home aid. So you all received the correspondence from the Rhode Island Department of Education. We also got an extensive brief from the town of West Greenwich, and I think we even got a response from our solicitor in Exeter, as brief as it may be. That said, so we have something to talk about. I will put the following motion on the floor. I move to have the EWG superintendent and EWG solicitor create a policy consistent with town group home A reimbursement with regard to Rhode Island General Law 16-64-1.1.
Second.
All right, so now we'll open it for discussion.
What exactly are you asking? We received the information from.
You did. And
From
in our previous meetings, we had discussed, perhaps you have forgotten, the
No.
issue.
Mhm.
As I said, I have the floor, you asked the question. In our previous meetings, and we had several meetings on this whole matter, what it revolved around was under the law 16-64-1.1. We asked an opinion from the Rhode Island Department of Education regarding group home aid and reimbursement. So I'm going to suggest at this point that unless our solicitor can state that he's uncomfortable with talking about it, I wouldn't mind have him reflect on where we came from and where we are and what we might do at this point. Right.
I just wanted him to clarify what he was asking. When this came on the agenda, it doesn't say, it just says a motion, but without further information. So it's hard to prepare without additional information, which we also need to provide when we're requesting something beyond the agenda. So I just want to know, because a decision was made. So thank you.
And opinions. But anyway,
Well, this was a nonpartisan question that I asked the Commissioner of Education. There potentially are two towns that could have an adverse interest here, because if you look on page 4, paragraph 3, kind of says the whole shooting match for what this is about. Is thus if the town of Exeter or West Greenwich actually made the per pupil payments mandated under 16-64-1.1C, an argument could be perhaps made that they would be entitled to be reimbursed under 16-64-1. However, that apparently has never happened that way, that it's always been the district that paid. So what the commissioner said was, it's semantics. There were two separate statutes that one said that the city or town shall be reimbursed, and the other, that's what the conflict was, said that the school district. Here, that's not one and the same. In North Kingstown, where I live, that is one and the same. It's the same pot. So it's her position that I can use this is for my own benefit, make it as simple as possible. He who pays gets paid back. That's what the decision was. And so I believe the chairman is saying he wanted the administration, I didn't know about the issue, but that he wants the administration to reflect upon and develop a policy if one need be adopted or proposed to address this in the future. I don't know if this always happens, the payment always happens the same way every time. And if it does, seeing Bob Shaker said it does, and I think consideration of the policy would be brief. It always happens this way, and the commissioner's perspective, unless you want to appeal it to the Superior Court, is what it is.
As we said with the prior one, going to court is expensive.
Yes, it is.
Can you repeat your motion? Chair Fenton, what are you looking for the policy to say? Exactly what we do?
Robin, do you have my motion? If not, I can repeat it for you. You don't? You
It's
said no.
not.
She said no.
She said no.
Ah. Okay, you know, I'm the worst hearing person here. And can't see. I move to have the EWG superintendent and EWG solicitor create a policy consistent for town group home reimbursement with regard to Rhode Island General Law 1664-1.1. That's it. So that everything, all the laws pertaining that are of interest seem to follow underneath that Rhode Island General. So that's where it's at. That's the law. So in other words, policy. So
So would you consider adding to your motion consistent with the Rhode Island, consistent with the decision from the Commissioner DO 21-001-A?
how is it that what I've said and what the commissioner said are different?
It just makes the motion more clear, I guess.
I would just
What's that?
get a second.
You have to propose the motion and it has to be seconded. You have to amend the
Well, I was
motion.
asking you if you want to add that to your, I can make an amendment.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Lauren.
Can I ask a question?
To whom?
Since numerous things are addressed in here, I think it would be beneficial to have them out specifically. Some specific ones.
What you said.
Yeah.
I said it would be good to list all the law sections specifically.
That's beyond my ability. I think that's beyond my ability to put into this motion. My motion is very simple. So I would hope that, are you suggesting that the motion or the policy?
The policy.
Policy? Well, that's up to the policy writers. I mean, policy writers in the motion are Jim Aronakis, the superintendent, and our solicitor, who's most familiar with the decision. So I'm putting my faith in those two individuals.
Well, I have plenty of faith in them. I would just like to see all the laws like listed in the motion as well that came up in here.
Motion.
That's all.
Jim, do we, I guess Attorney Freed and Jim, do we need a policy?
Well, I'll say this because I need some additional information. I actually don't know what we have to do. Maybe Attorney Craven does, but he and I have not had a conversation about this. Because we don't typically write a policy that just restates what's already in law. We need a policy to restate the law. So
You do.
You do in order to be in this subject.
A perfect example would be,
Maybe we do, but if that's the case, I just need a lot more direction about what we have.
so that's, I understand your dilemma, Jim, but I think that could be offline to the actual motion itself. I believe the motion itself, I don't want to list, and I would suggest that if you can carry that, and right now, the only motion that's on the floor right now is the one that I stated. If any of you two individuals want to amend the motion with whatever you wanted to say, you are free to address the committee. So I need something, then you need all the laws. That's not specific for me. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an attorney. That's not specific for me. But if you have some amendment to the motion that's on the floor that you would like to pass by the school committee, by all means, go right ahead.
I guess I'm just misunderstanding. You both said that anything that we do that's already a law, we have to put into policy. But I'm sure there are plenty of laws out there. There are things that we do that are not currently in a policy for the school. So I'm concerned that if this is how we're going, we have to create every single law that's ever been done anywhere and create a policy here for it. Or why is this one
I think
different?
it's in the decision, but anyway, if you have an amendment to speed us along here, do you have an amendment to the motion that's on the floor currently? Or does either one of you have an amendment to the motion that's on the floor right
I'm not gonna make a motion, I think. I don't think,
An amendment.
I'm not gonna make an amendment. I think if an attorney created and superintendent Aaron just wanna look it up, if policy is even needed and come back with the school, to the school committee, I don't wanna make an amendment because I don't believe we need a policy.
Well, because the policy doesn't exist.
We don't need one. We have a decision by the commissioner.
Silly me. All right, how about Ms. Griffiths? Do you have an amendment to the motion that's currently on the floor?
No, I don't,
right.
because again, if it's a law, it's a law. We
Sure.
can't violate the law, and if we're voting to violate the law, then we're abrogating our power and we're in all deep doo-doo. Thanks.
So at this point, I'm going to entertain any other further comments or questions from the membership of the school committee. Hearing none, I'm going to.
have one.
Never Monroe
Oh dear. What was
has-
that?
I just want to say, I think we're already spending a lot of attorney fees on this matter that I don't want to continue to spend money on if there's already a lot in place, but to spend the time to use legal fees to write a policy for a law that already exists.
Such as the $34,000 question.
Well, we're talking about this question.
Okay, yeah. Just a little joke. All right, so there's a motion on the floor. At this time, I'm going to move the motion. All those in support of the motion that's on the floor signify by saying aye. Those against signify by saying nay. Abstentions. Motion passes. All right. So feel free. It's been a long night for me. I'd like to bring your attention to important dates and meetings. The next the next meeting will be Tuesday, November 23rd, which is before Thanksgiving. That's usually a light turnout from the school committee. I would like you to keep in mind that I'd like to keep in the committee that I may change its location to Wallalone. We occasionally do meetings at Wallalone. And so make sure you pay attention to your agenda, and we may meet at Wallalone Elementary School. We do that occasionally, excuse me, on that meeting. So we're not going to have an executive session. So I need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.